You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Trump's approval ratings are in, and Republicans are loving what he's doing. That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. That and more. And I'm Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. A new Pew Research Center survey just out this week. 7 in 10 or more Republicans and Republican-leaning independents approve of Trump's job performance. 75% say that. His administration's cuts to government, 78% say that. His increased tariffs, 70% of Republicans and Republican-leaning independents say that. And his ending of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, Marxist policies in the federal government, 78% say that. Non-surprisingly, unsurprisingly, not shockingly, Democrats, complete opposite. Before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at washingtontimes.com, where I would invite you to subscribe to my Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley newsletter. I just need you to enter your email address at the newsletter link, and you'll get delivered right to your email box Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. My commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, as well as my Tuesday and Thursday Bold and Blunt podcasts. You can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. All right, so back to this Pew by comparison survey of Democrats. By comparison, Pew writes, even wider majorities of Democrats and Democrat leaners disapprove of Trump's job performance. 93% of Democrats and those who lean Democrat say they disapprove of Trump's job performance. Wow, 93%. The Democrats really do march in lockstep, don't they? 89% of Democrats say they disapprove of this White House's cuts to government. Of course they do, because that is by and large the Democrat workforce, right? It's just government, taxpayer-funded positions. 90% don't like Trump's increased tariffs, and 86% of Democrats and Democrat leaners disapprove of Trump's end to DEI policies in the federal government. Well, there's a whole bunch of findings in this survey. And one thing that struck me as interesting, which I actually agree with, is 51% of U.S. adults say Trump is setting too much policy through executive orders. Another 27% say he's doing about the right amount of executive orders, and 5% say he's doing too little in executive orders. And that's just U.S. adults in general, regardless of the party. But I have to agree. And I think presidents in general over the last decades have been using and abusing the executive order power that is vested in the executive branch, far too much. I think Barack Obama took it on steroids. He was the one that just proudly claimed, who the heck needs Congress? I have a pen, I have a phone. I can just sign away executive orders. I can just sign away orders. I can mandate. I can push policies through the federal system that the congressional members who are duly elected by the people could not pass, right? They couldn't pass them in Congress because the people who voted for the congressional members didn't want them to pass. And so Obama just said, well, hell's bells, I'm going to go ahead and pass them anyhow. And he would sign an executive order, and he would sign another executive order, and then even another executive order. And next thing you know, bureaus are being created, and borders are being opened, and illegals are flowing into America. And the Democrat Party's response is, well, we'll just fight it in court. We'll just fight it in court, and we'll just keep pushing forward Obama's agenda until a court tells us to stop. And then even then, maybe we will, maybe we won't. Same thing under Joe Biden, right? Joe Biden, who, let's face it, he was unaware of what was going on in his own administration. He had enough to do with trying to get his shoes tied and his coat put on without tripping himself up. That occupied much of his day. And in the meanwhile, there was a third Obama shadow presidency that was pushing the agenda through the White House. And so then we had Obama's executive orders on steroids, on even more steroids. I don't know what you would call that. Double steroids, double doses of steroids, triple doses of steroids under Joe Biden. And Joe Biden was signing executive orders doing all kinds of crazy things. A college student just out of college can't pay your student loan, don't want to pay your student loan? Here, Joe Biden's got some free cash for you called taxpayer funds. Don't have to pay your student loan anymore. What's that? What's that, Joe? Supreme Court tells you can't do that anymore? Well, just rename it. Find something else. Sign another executive order and push through the taxpayer-funded freebie handout to lazy college graduates who don't want to work to repay their loans and would rather live off the taxpayer dole, the taxpayer dime, or in this case, the taxpayer billions, and just ignore what the court says. And now, fast forward to Donald Trump's second administration, and we have Democrats accusing him of ignoring courts. Isn't that just special, right? Isn't that the pot calling the kettle black, or is it the kettle calling the pot black? I don't know. I don't know which one starts the name calling, whether it's the pot or the kettle, but either way, Democrats always accuse others of what they themselves are guilty of doing, right? That's the Democrat way. It's really astonishing. The Democrat power, it's more like a superpower. To be blind to their own sins, to be blind to their own guilty actions, while meanwhile hypocritically calling out others for perceived same sins, for perceived same actions. It's a superpower that the Democrats possess, the ability to blame others while they're blind to their own faults that they're blaming others for doing. It's really a talent. It's really a talent of the Democrats. Back to Pew. Half of Americans say Trump's policies are weakening U.S. standing in the world compared with Biden's policies. This is very interesting to me because as far as I could tell, Biden didn't have any foreign policy except to do what the globalists bid him to do, which is to say, advance Term 3 Barack Obama foreign policy. Anyhow, about 4 in 10 or 38% say Trump's policies are putting the U.S. in a stronger position internationally. Views of the impact of Trump's policies on the economy are nearly identical. And here's the very interesting summary summary paragraph for this page. The GOP, the Republican Party, is viewed more favorably than the Democrat Party, a shift from recent years. Views of the Republican Party have trended more positive over the last year, and 43% now have a favorable view. Views of the Democrat Party are little changed over the last few years, with 38% now expressing a favorable view. Well, yeah, the Democrat Party has really fallen from favor with the American people because the Democrats insisted on having a weekend at Bernie's dead man as president for 4 years and telling us all that what we saw with our own eyes was just completely untrue, that this man, this Joe Biden man, this puppet dead man walking president man called Joe Biden was completely, utterly, 100% mentally proficient. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here, folks. Go home. What's that? Joe called out another dead person? Told a guy in a wheelchair to stand up and take a bow? What's that? He read the stage directions from his podium? Oh, what's that? He tripped and fell off his bike and then fell on the sand dunes after he fell off his sneakers, after he fell out of the lifts in his sneakers? No, that's normal behavior. That has nothing to do with somebody who is incompetent. So that's a big reason why Democrats have fallen from favor, because the Democrat Party told us that what we saw with our own eyes was a lie. But another reason the Democrat Party has fallen from favor is because, after the eyes were opened to the ridiculousness of the Joe Biden presidency, then those same eyes started looking around and saying, hey, why is my gas $5 a gallon? What the heck is going on here? Why is this box of cereal about the size of a thimble and they're charging $8 for it instead of $3.50? So the eyes opened and started surveying the economy. And the next thing you know, the eyes looked southward toward the border, and they saw scores and scores, mass hordes of people just marching across the border, and then saw them being picked up in buses and brought to points west, north, and east, and housed in public schools and abandoned buildings and hotels, and fed and given medical treatment, but not the medical treatments that American citizens were forced to take, like the COVID shots or the slapping of face masks on the face, not anything to do with that medical treatment, but free medical care and other care, things that didn't have to do with COVID. And again, all at taxpayer expense. So eyes were opened and people started putting two and two together, and they started seeing the link between Joe Biden, Barack Obama, Democrat Party, and utter destruction of America. They started drawing those connections. They started seeing the parallel. They started noticing that anytime a Democrat is in charge, the systems crumble, except for the illegals. And then they're propped up by tax dollars. And so there has been a lot of eye-opening of late. And yes, the Democrats have largely an unfavorable view. And for the first time in years, the Republican Party, led by Donald Trump, led by a great cabinet that Donald Trump has selected, and led by a Republican-dominated House and Senate, right? The Republican Party is gaining favor with the American people. And to hear firsthand how America now is being viewed by some overseas, by some in foreign governments, by citizens of other nations, let me introduce my guest, Shea Bradley Farrell. She is the president of the Counterpoint Institute for Policy, Research, and Education, and the author of the great book, Last Warning to the West. Shea, I want to thank you so much for being back on Bold and Blunt. It is so great to have you here.
Cheryl, this is definitely an honor to be with you. And actually, I'm coming to you from Budapest, Hungary today.
It's so amazing. You're on your book tour. Talk just before we get into all the national security and foreign policy things that you're expert in. Just talk a little bit about your book tour. What the book is, where you've been speaking, and what you have coming up.
Well, sure. You remember it's called Last Warning to the West. It's about Hungary's triumph over communism and the woke agenda. And anyway, I'm hitting like 4 or 5 different cities throughout Europe: Brussels, Vienna, Madrid, Warsaw, Budapest, of course. And people have invited me to talk about, okay, now that the Trump administration is in place, is it really still our last warning, and or what is the hope in that? So it's going to be not just a discussion about my book, but about the way that the systems are going to change under Trump. I mean, we certainly have seen that in the United States, and it's with the tariffs and everything else going on. He's going to change the order over here too. I believe the global economic and political system he is recreating, Cheryl.
That's such a good question that people even overseas are asking, because so much, of course, centers on what America does and who leads in the White House and the politics of the United States. And that's really, in essence, what I wanted to talk with you about today, because so much is taking place under this administration with foreign policy and national security. You, as president of the Counterpoint Institute, are expert in these affairs. Let's talk tariffs first. The media is trying to slant the tariffs as if they are the worst thing for America. But I think long-term strategy, this is going to be tremendous and great for the United States.
Yeah, I think you are exactly correct, Cheryl. We need a recreation of the system. And these tariffs that Trump is imposing, they're necessary. I mean, we have been bearing the burden of other countries developing on our dime, basically. We've been doing that for decades, and we've had decades of presidents that would not address that backward system, and Trump has to do it. And I spoke at a conference here, the Central European Summit, on Tuesday, and I was explaining to people, look at these tariffs as a diplomatic leveraging tool coming from the Trump administration, because he has used these tariffs, for example, to get Mexico and Canada to stop the flow, or at least try to stop the flow of fentanyl across our borders, killing Americans in record numbers. So he's using this as leverage. And, we have, the European Union has a surplus against the United States. China, there are so many countries that have a surplus, and we have to get back. We have to get on some sort of level playing field, because not only is that a problem for us, but you have to look at it, I tell people, in the whole context. We have been supporting by far this war over here between Ukraine and Russia. $200 billion at least has been sent or appropriated for this war. We are supporting between 12 and 20 million illegal immigrants on our soil right now that we're deporting. China has grown stronger economically and politically, militarily, on our dime. And, you and I have talked about this before. During the Biden administration, something like 200,000 Chinese came to the U.S. illegally. I believe many of those have come to sabotage the U.S. So you've got to look at these things in context. We can't continue this way. We can't continue bearing the brunt of NATO. So in my viewpoint, Trump is the first president to stand up and be brave enough to say that this has to stop.
It really is a courageous stance he's taking, because there is some suffering that's taking place on the part of Americans in terms of providing financially for themselves and their families. But it's short term, correct? And when I say suffering, I just mean on a limited basis for some Americans. On 401ks, for instance, on investments, businesses are crying. Some businesses are crying about the tariffs and how it's impacting their bottom line, and that's being passed on to consumers. But that's all short term.
It is short term, and you know what you do if one product is more expensive and you can't afford it. You move on to a different product, and that's the whole point. Trump is trying to rearrange it so that we're buying more American products, or we're buying products from countries that are not crippling us under their regulations and under their tariffs. So yes, I do believe it's short term. I mean, one example of that, and I don't take the stock market lightly. I don't mean that. But one example is that as soon as, these 75 nations, was it last week, came to Trump and said, oh, we're sorry, we will negotiate. Trump said, okay, well, I'm not going to slap those extra tariffs on you. All of a sudden, the stock market is booming again. It is, like you said, not the solution, I guess is what I'm trying to say, will be so much better for Americans in the long run. If we do not do something about it now to level the playing field on all these areas that I just mentioned, we will go into decline. We have $40 trillion debt. If we go into decline, who will the dominant power be? It will be China. And that's not good for our allies in Europe either. And so they need to understand that. We cannot continue in the way we are. It just doesn't make sense.
So I had a list of things that I wanted to discuss with you on foreign policy, but I do want to take advantage of the fact that there you are in Europe right now, and you are hearing from people firsthand what they think of this administration, their thoughts, their opinions on the tariffs and foreign policy. What can you tell me that you're hearing specifically from people overseas right now about this administration?
Well, I was very gratified, actually, because during the conference, some of my colleagues that were on stage with me for discussion, other colleagues that I heard throughout the conference, they're coming from countries all in Central Europe, but also we had a senior advisor to Bibi Netanyahu, speaking there from Israel and from several other different countries around the world. And what I was hearing is that they're relieved that we have this administration that is knocking down the DEI nonsense, and you know what, Cheryl, I had to kind of smile, but I was hearing from leaders, common sense leaders, and I'm talking about senior government officials that were saying, we understand that the United States has to apply these tariffs. We get it. We're trying to go and negotiate with the United States. Hungary has even said, we understand that we have to bear more of our burden in NATO. We need to increase our 2% of our GDP to 3% of the military spending for NATO. So those who are not short-sighted, those who are not anti-Trump or pro-Marxism, in my viewpoint, which the European Union is, understand the reality of the situation and that it's necessary. So I was very gratified. Israel is feeling right now that they have 100% support from the Trump administration. That also is very gratifying to hear. I did also feel, though, from some of the public that there was fear about the tariffs. And so I tried to explain what I have said to you today. Don't panic. The sooner your country comes to negotiate, the better it will be for your country, for us. But that's what Trump wants. That's what America wants. We want a negotiation that is fair, that levels the playing field. And Cheryl, we are a very giving nation. I think in circumstances where countries do need more help, we'll give that. But that's not the case. I mean, you look at China. Right. China was a backwards developing country when they entered the World Trade Organization, and now they're second. Their economy is second in the world. I mean, it's not the case anymore, and that's what people understand. We've stayed in this status quo, and I think that Trump is taking a sledgehammer to the status quo internationally against the globalist agenda. And hey, we've seen it certainly back in the United States against the waste, fraud, abuse, the DEI, and all of this nonsense.
And it's interesting because the United Kingdom, the High Court there, just struck a win against DEI with their recent ruling on women, right? Women are defined as by their birth gender, which is very interesting. It's a battle that's taken place in America as well.
Yes, and the audience was also very happy to hear. I told them that one of the first things that Trump did when he got into office was to put out an executive order that says, there's only two sexes, guys. So anyway, they were also very happy to hear that, because the progressive social ideology that the Biden administration has been pushing into countries is oppressive to many of these countries who are more traditional, more conservative. It tramples on their religious liberty. And I explained to them, too, the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is only at about 18% of what it was, that was the main organization that the U.S. was using to push LGBT programs into these countries. Yep. I always like to cite this one. We were under Biden funding transgender ballroom dancing and in Peru. Now, when I said that the other day to the audience, they laughed, and I said, I'm serious.
Yeah.
We really were. So I think that they were very encouraged to see such a turnaround in the United States, because we had been viewed, when I was over here last time during the Biden administration, we were being laughed at. And public will, public diplomacy needs to be strong for the United States. It actually contributes to our national security.
So what is word on the ground over there about the state of borders? Because, when you read reports in America about what's going on in Europe, in many instances you read about they're being overrun by radical Islamic elements, and the culture has completely and forever after changed. What do you see, and what do you hear from people there?
Well, that is absolutely true in some ways, absolutely true. So you have to understand that the European Union looks at borders like the Biden administration looked at borders.
Yes.
They're null and non-existent, basically. So this is why the Trump administration is butting heads with the EU, and the EU did not with the Biden administration. So what has happened over the past 10 years, when they invited people to come in without checks, without any kind of common sense regulations and approach, you're correct. There are areas in France and in Germany where the police won't even go into. They've become these little subsidies of Islamic citizens of Arab nations, and that's a very strange and dangerous situation. That is why we have seen terrorism rise in Europe in the past 10 years. And let me contrast that, though, Cheryl, with Hungary, who did not allow that. They tried to go along with the European Union in 2015 when they wanted illegal immigrants to go through Hungary to Germany and other nations. Well, after a certain point, when hundreds of thousands had come across and Hungary was trying to register them and bring them through, there's this little country, Cheryl, of 10 million people. They declared emergency. They said, we can't do this. And that's when they put up physical borders, they put up rules and regulations, and they haven't allowed it. And so if we look at Hungary and other countries that did not allow it or stopped it, there is no terrorism here. So that's the main point to make. And Hungary is very much oppressed in the European Union because of their situation on immigration, as well as on their pushback against the gender ideology that the EU wants them to accept, and et cetera.
Two more quick questions, because as always with you, time flies by when we're chatting. So one of Trump's aims, implied or stated, is to use the tariffs to basically break China's influence, right, around the world. So in his negotiations with other nations, do you think that ultimately his goal or the effect will be to sort of crumble the EU? Because as these countries forge their own trade agreements with America, it will sort of have them more independent from the EU. Do you see what I'm saying here? And do you think this is a possibility? The EU itself will crumble?
I don't know, but that is something that I have been thinking about. My husband and I have discussed. It is a possibility that it will weaken, not only because of that, but because I think people are getting tired of the lawfare being used in the European Union against political opponents, just like has been happening in the U.S. against Donald Trump. It's a very similar situation. But to go back to the trade, Italy's prime minister today met with Donald Trump to talk about tariffs. I know that the Hungarian prime minister did as well. I do not understand the ins and outs of the European approach to trade rules and regulations, but I do understand that the EU is supposed to act as a bloc in most circumstances in trade. So there are countries going around this. Now, whether that's legal or not with the EU, I don't know. But I think it's smart because what I have heard in negotiations that are going on is that not only is that country negotiating with the U.S. getting a deal that is mutually beneficial, but there are provisions in these trade agreements that are isolating China and pushing China back.
Yes.
So I think it is also, it's to China's detriment, but that's a wonderful thing. And this is why I'm glad we have a strong president who will step up and take charge of this. But I think you make a very interesting point about the EU, and I think that the lawfare situation people are getting really exhausted with. And the second thing is that the EU continues to try to take sovereignty away from these nation states by imposing their own political values, their own social ideology, and I think the EU is getting more pushback than it has in ever, really.
Yeah, it's so exciting and inspirational, I think, to see how just a new presidency in America has a ripple effect around the world, and where that's going to lead. It's going to be interesting to watch over the next 3+ years. I just want to quickly shift gears because I want you to weigh in for the last question on Russia, Ukraine. What's the latest? What can we expect? What do you think this administration's outcome is going to bring?
Well, sadly, I would say that for the most part, it's still status quo. Russia and Ukraine are still fighting. But I will tell you that I think that Trump and the Trump administration is they're coming to the end of their patience, to the end of their rope. So my guess is that we will see harsher sanctions against Russia. And Trump has always held the cards. When he met with Zelensky and Zelensky had that temper tantrum at the White House, he kept telling Zelensky, you don't hold the cards. You don't hold the cards. And he's right. We, the United States, has supplied by far more money than any other nation bloc, or nation state, by far, and especially in military aid. So here's the thing, we've given around $65 billion in military aid. If we pull that, they cannot continue to fight. They must come to the negotiating table. So I think that sanctions against Russia may get harsher. But here's the other thing that I think is interesting, Cheryl. Under the Biden administration, we saw constantly what the U.S. was sending and doing in aid. Strangely, I'm seeing very little in the news about that, so I don't know what the story is. I don't know exactly if we have pulled back on that a lot or if Congress is trying to get Trump to up it. I would assume there are hawks that are trying to do that, but anyway, I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, the news all seems focused on tariffs right now because it's the easiest way that the media, the legacy media, the leftist media can ding Donald Trump in their perception anyhow. I really want to thank you so much for your time and your insights overseas from Europe. Shea Bradley Farrell, thank you very much for being on Bold and Blunt. Talk soon.
Good, always good to talk to you, Cheryl. You've got one of the very best shows out there, so it's really a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. So nice of her. She's such a nice person and so very intelligent. I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.
You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.